Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Kiddushin Chaf Daled, and we're going to start on the bottom of Chaf Gimel on the base of 23b. The Gemara has said in yesterday's Daf the position of Rabbi Meir and the Rabbanan, that the Rabbi Meir says the idea that there is no kinyan for an Eved B'Lo Rabo, Ein kinyan Isha B'Lo Bala, that if you give money to a slave, the slave does not acquire it, the master acquires it. You give money to a woman, to a wife, the husband acquires it. Whereas the Rabbanan disagree, and the Rabbanan said you can give it to a slave and you can give it to a wife without the husband acquiring it. Gemara says in the bottom of Chav Gimel Beis, the bottom line, Rami de Rabbi Meir ad Rabbi Meir, Rami de Rabbanan ad Rabbanan. This position of Rabbi Meir that Ein Kinyan B'Lo Rabo, Ein Kinyan Isha B'Lo Bala contradicts the position that Rabbi Meir says elsewhere, and the Rabbanan's position contradicts the Rabbanan's position elsewhere. The Tanya, because we have the Bryce, so we're on top of Chaf Daled Amud Aleph in Kiddushin, and the Bryce tells us, now, a woman, when she comes to redeem Meiser Sheni, she has to pay the extra fifth. What are we talking about here? Meiser Sheni is the tithe that you have to bring the produce to Jerusalem in order to eat it. But if you can't bring it, you could redeem it onto money. But if you're the owner and you're redeeming your Meiser Sheni, you have to add 20% to the value of the produce when you redeem it. If you're redeeming somebody else's Meiser Sheni to bring it to Jerusalem to eat, you don't have to pay the extra 20%. So we say here that a wife has to pay the extra 20% as though she's redeeming her own Meiser Sheni. And the assumption of the Gemara here is that she's taking the Meiser Sheni from her husband's field and she wants to redeem it. And it's going to be considered to be his tithe. And even though she's redeeming it, she has to, and it's her husband's, it's not directly hers, she has to pay the extra fifth. That's the Gemara's assumption at this point, but the Gemara will change that later on. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says in the name of Rabbi Meir, Isha poda Meiser Sheni b'lo chomesh, that the woman can indeed redeem the Meiser Sheni without adding the extra fifth. So the Gemara says, what's the scenario we're referring to? Heichi dami. If you want to say it's the husband's money and it's the husband's produce, the Meiser Sheni of the husband, well then shlichusei de balkov, well then she's just her husband's agent, and of course she has to pay the extra fifth. So if you want to say, what must we be talking about? It must be we're talking about it's her money and it's his Meiser Sheni. Well, if that's the case, if it's her money and his Meiser Sheni, that also won't work. Why? Isha Marachmana v'lo Isha. We'll go with Rashi's approach here, even though many of the commentaries argue. Well, Rashi says, Ish mi Masra Marachmana. The Torah says that a husband redeems his Meiser, v'lo Isha mi Meiser Bawa, and a woman doesn't pay an extra fifth when redeeming her husband's Meiser. So we can't have the assumption that it's her money and it's his Meiser Sheni, because then she would have to pay the extra fifth. And if that, she wouldn't have to pay the extra fifth because it's not hers. That's what the Ish mi Meiser Amar Isha mi Meiser Bawa. So why would the Rabbanan say that she have to pay the extra fifth there when there's a specific verse telling us she doesn't? So it must be Elav ki agavne. So what are we talking about here where the Rabbanan say she has to pay the extra fifth? The Aknile Achar Mana, that somebody else gave her the money. And he said to her when he gave it to her, I'm giving this to you on the condition that you have to redeem the Meiser. And the Rabbanan say, and now we're seeing the reverse of what we saw before. The Rabbanan are saying in this case that she has to pay the extra fifth. It means her husband really has gotten the money. Whereas the Meir says she doesn't pay, it means that the money is hers and not her husband's. So therefore, we see that we've reversed the positions of what we said before. So Abaye says, "I'm Abaye Epoch." We'll have to reverse the positions. We mixed up the names, and really the position of the Rabbanon here is really Rabbi Meir. That which we said that she has to pay the fifth, that's Rabbi Meir. And the position says she doesn't have to pay the fifth, that's the Rabbanon. Amar Rava disagrees with Abaye's approach that we just switched the names. Rava says, well, don't switch the names. And what's the scenario of the brisa? It's not a simple case of taking Meiser Sheni from the field of the husband. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about where she inherited the Meiser Sheni. Rabbi Meir with Tamei, Rabbi Meir follows his logic. What's his logic? He says, Meiser Mamon Hektishu. That this is going to be a dispute later on in our Masechta in Parak Beis in the second chapter, where we say, Meir says that Meiser is going to be considered to be the money of God. It's the money of the temple, and so therefore, there's going to be a dispute later on whether or not you can be Mekadesh with this Meiser Sheni money. According to Rabbi Meir, if you try to betroth a person, if a man tries to betroth a woman with the Meiser Sheni money, it doesn't work because the Meiser Sheni money is going to be considered the money, sacred money. It's not really their own money. And so here, what Rabbi Meir is saying is that the Meiser money is Mammon of Hektishu. And so therefore, since it's the money of the temple, it's not the husband's. Well, Kani Labal. Therefore, when she inherits it, the husband doesn't get it. It's a carved out exclusion. Normally, he has the rights to the fruits of her inheritance, if not the fruits themselves. He has the rights to the fruits of the inheritance. But here, I mean, not the real estate itself, but the fruits. Here, in this case, he doesn't get it. And so therefore, since he doesn't get it, under these circumstances, Rabbi and she says the husband has not acquired it. And so therefore, since the husband has not acquired it, look at Rashi. Rashi says, she's redeeming the Meiser Sheni money with the money, Meiser Sheni produce with the money of the husband. So it's not his tithe. And so therefore, she doesn't pay an extra fifth with it because it's his money redeeming the Meiser Sheni that belongs to her. Whereas the Rabbanon with Tamayo, the Rabbanon say, the Rabbanon say it is actually the money of the person. The Kaniwe Baal, when she gets this Meiser Sheni, he's acquired the fruits. And Hilkach Shechusa the Baal Ka'avda. So when she's taking his money and redeeming it, she's just acting as his agent, and so therefore she has to pay the extra fifth according to the Rabbana. So now we go into the sugya of the Canaanite slave goes free if 24 limbs or the tooth and the eye are knocked out from the Canaanite slave. Tana Yotzi b'shem v'ayin v'roshe avarim she'ein chozim. So the Canaanite slave goes out with the tooth and the eye, or if the tips of 24 limbs that don't regenerate are knocked out. What are these 24 limbs? The 20 digits, the 10 fingers, the 10 toes, and also then the 2 ears, the nose, and the tip of the male member. Bishlam Hashem Vayin, the Gemara says, I understand why the tooth or the eye, the Canaanite slave, goes free. Ksive, it's explicitly written in the verse. It says explicitly in the verse about the tooth and the eye. But Rashi Avarim, and how do we know that these 24 limbs, if you knock them out, that the person goes free? Gemara explains, Dumya Deshem V'ayin, it's similar to the tooth and the eye. Ma'ashem V'ayin, Moment Shevagoa V'einon Chozim. Just like the tooth and the eye are external blemishes, meaning they're visible, and they don't regenerate, meaning they're on the outside of the body, and they don't regenerate. So to any external blemish that does not regenerate. Gemara says, but wait, maybe we should say it's only the tooth and the eye, because maybe we'll say that the tooth and the eye are like two verses that come and teach the same thing. And we have a principle called Shnei Ksubim Abam Ke'echad Ein Melandin. Anytime you have two verses that teach the same thing, we say that it's limited to that specific ruling and it's not in any other case. So that's a principle throughout the Shas. So the Gemara says, no, tzricha. That's only where you don't have a need why it needs to be repeated. But there is a need why the tooth and the eye both need to be said. And so therefore you can learn from them to other cases. What's the reason why we need the Torah to tell us both about the tooth and the eye? Because of Rahman Hashem. If the Torah would just say the tooth, Ava Amina, I might have thought, on top of 24b, Afilu Shein Decholav. I might have thought even a baby tooth, that if the master knocks out a baby tooth, the slave also goes free. Kasav Rahmana Ayin. So therefore the Torah writes an eye. Because Rahmana Ayin, and if the Torah had just written about the eye, Ava Amina Ma'ayin Shenivrimo, of course Shenivrimo. I might have thought, just like the eye was created with the slave, so too it has to be created with the slave. Aval Shein, but a regular adult tooth, whoa, since not created with the slave, I might have thought you don't go free if you knock it out. So therefore you need both cases. Tzricha. Mar says ve'ema, but maybe I'll say kiyake klal, when it says in the verse that if the master strikes, that's a general rule. And then shein ve'ayin, and then he says the tooth or the eye, that's a prat, that's a specific rule. And we have a principle, klal prat. Whenever you have a general followed by a specific, it only refers to the specifics. And so therefore, maybe we'll say, Shein Vayin in B'Diachrini, that the tooth and the eye, indeed, the tooth and the eye, you are indeed, the slave will go free, but maybe that's it. Gemara says, no, L'chavshi Yishachanu. It then says, L'chavshi, freedom he shall be sent, which is another general rule, Chazar Uklal. So we have a principle of Klal prat to klal, general, specific, general. And then we say iatadan el ka'ena prat, whatever similar to the specific. And we say ma prat mefurash mum shebegoy ve'ena chozim. Just like the specific is something that's an external wound and it does not regenerate. Avkol mum shebegoy ve'ena chozim. So to anything that's external and doesn't regenerate, you're going to go free. Ima aprat mefurash. Well, maybe the specific is something that's revealed, it doesn't regenerate, but also it loses its ability to work. So therefore, so maybe that's the case. It has to be lose its ability to work. But why do we say in the Brisa, let's say you tug at his beard, and you shook out the bone of the slave, that they do go free, even though the jaw is still able to work there, Rashi explains. Even though the bone is broken, you could still chew. So Rashi says, because it wasn't doing so much work. So you should still be able. So why do we say it goes free if it's still able to do its job? Mara says, okay, it's not a call prat to call. It's what's called a riboy achar riboy, or it's called a riboy, amplification, ribohu. And so that l'chavshi shalchanu, it says the words l'chavshi shalchanu to tell us amplified, include more cases. Mara says riboyu, if it's including more cases, I feel we call yadav et samta, and even if you strike the hand and the hand gets wounded, or even though in the end it's going to come back, you should also go free. But we say that the slave doesn't go free. But why not? Why don't we include it if it's a reboy? We're saying no, anyway, tooth and the eye are certainly limiting some cases. It's limiting that case, but it's including the other cases. Says the Gemara, Tan Rabbanan Bekulam, in all these cases, a slave goes free. V'tzarach get shechur. Even though he goes free once the limbs are knocked out, he still needs the paperwork. He needs the document of emancipation. That's the position of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Meir says, Eino tzarach. Rabbi Meir says he does not need this document of emancipation. He goes free even without it. Rabbi Elazar Omer Tzarach, Rabbi Tarfon Omer Eino Tzarach. Rabbi Akiva says Tzarach, and the Machriim of Nechacham Omer Niran Divrei Rabbi Tarfon B'Shem V'Ayin. We agree with the scholars, the ones who decide the matter, said before the Chachamim say, we agree with Rabbi Tarfon that you don't need the paperwork, you don't need to get shechor by a shein v'ayin, she'atorah zachto, because the Torah specifically writes tooth and eye, which means he goes free without even the documentation. Divrei Rabbi Akiva, and I agree with Rabbi Akiva, b'shari, by all the other 24 limbs that you need the paperwork, all the kinas v'chamim, since it's a penalty of the chachamim. Gemara says kinas, so why would you say it's a penalty? Cry. Kardashinan. They're expounding a verse. Okay, so it says Gemara, midrash chachamim, since it's just a drasha, you need the paperwork, you need the get shechor. My time with Rabbi Shimon. What's the reason why Rabbi Shimon says that? What's the reason why Rabbi Shimon says you need a document of emancipation? What's the reasoning? Yoav shilach mi'isha. He compares it to a woman who's being divorced. Ma'isha b'shtara f'avanami b'shtara. Just like a woman who's being divorced needs a contract, also a slave needs a contract of divorce. Rabbi Meir says you don't. Rabbi Meir's position, who says you don't need this document, he said ichas of chav shilu b'sof kedekamis. If it would say the word free at the end of the verse, would be like you said, hash. But here it says free you shall send. It means he's immediately free. He doesn't need to be sent. He doesn't need a document of emancipation. Let's say he strikes him on the eye and he blinds him. He strikes him on the ear and he goes deaf. Then we're going to say he goes free. But keneged eino ve'eino ro. Let's say he strikes him next to the eye and he can't see, or keneged ozno ve'eino shomea, next to the ear and now he can't hear. Even ever yotze ve'eino cheres. The slave does not go free under those circumstances. So Amar Rav Shimon Rav Ashi L'meimra, as if to say dekoa lav klumu. So since you're just making a sound next to the ear, but you're not actually touching the ear, you've done nothing. So you're saying that a voice is nothing, or sound is nothing. But how can we say that sound is nothing? Didn't we see that Rami Bar Yecheskel says, Tarnagol shahoshit rosho avir? Let's say there's a rooster that stuck his head into the airspace of a klizuchuchas, of a glass utensil. Talk about when he made a sound, v'shavar, when he broke it, v'sham nezik sham, the owner of the rooster has to pay full damages, because you could obviously expect that to happen. And so therefore, even though he didn't touch it, he has to pay the full damages. And Rashi explains that this follows the position of Sumchus, who says that an animal did damage with tzoros are like pebbles that it kicks off, pays full damages. And so therefore, here, this was a rooster is a muad to do this, and he has to pay, is expected to do this, and therefore has to pay the full damages. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Beirav, Sus Shetsanaf, Chamor Shanar, V'Shivro Kelim B'toch Habayis V'Shalom Chatzi Nezik. If you have a horse that brays, or a horse that neighs, or a donkey that brays, and they broke the utensils in the house, you pay half damages. And the Gemara explains that Rashi explains that Rav Yosef, in the name of Rav, is ruling like the Rabbanan who argue with Sumchus, and they say that if you do the half damages with tzoros, with pebbles, if you do the damages with tzoros, with pebbles, you pay half damages, not full damages. But anyway, we see from here that even though you're not touching it directly, you have to pay damages. So why in this case do we say if the slave is not hit directly, that he doesn't go free? So the Gemara explains, Shani Adam. So Rav Ashi explains back to Rav Shemen, Shani Adam, given the Bardasio, Il Mavis Nafshe. If a person is different, that since he is a person of Das, he has his own knowledge, he is scaring himself. He scared himself. Somebody who frightens his friend is exempt from the laws of man. You're liable by heaven. But in the end, your friend has frightened himself. If you blow in the ear and you make him deaf, you're exempt. But achazeo v'taka v'azno v'charsho. But if you hold him down and then you blow in his ear, then you're chayav, you're liable. But we see from here a powerful phrase: a man, kivan de bardasu, since a human being is a person of knowledge, iu mabis nashe. He's scaring himself. He's scaring himself. And so therefore, if you just scare your friend, you're exempt from the laws of man, and you're liable by the laws of heaven. Tan Rabbanan, the Brisa says, let's say you strike him on the eye, and therefore you diminish the eyesight. Al shino, on the tooth, you make it loose. If you could still use the eye and the tooth, the slave does not go free. Otherwise, the slave does go free. Whereas Tanya Idach, the alternative Brisa, it says, if his eye was weak and he blinded him, Shino, his tooth was Neduda Vipil, his tooth was loose and he knocked it out. If he was able to use them, then Eved Yotze Ben Lacheres, the slave goes free. But if he wasn't able to use it, Ein Eved Yotze Ben Lacheres, the slave does not go free. So we need both of these prices. The Gemara says, Tricha. We need both prices. Why? If we just learned the first price, then I would say, at first he had good eyesight. Now he has bad eyesight. That's why I would say, under those circumstances, he can't use it. And so therefore, since at first he had good eyesight, and now he has, so therefore I would say he goes free, because at first he had good eyesight, and now he has bad eyesight. And so therefore we have to learn that it depends whether or not he can use it. But here I might have said in the second Bryce, if he had at the beginning bad eyesight, I might have said he doesn't go free, because he had bad eyesight. And if we only had the second Bryce, I would say Mishum de Samuel Gamri. Why does he go free? Because he completely blinded him. Someone in the first Bryce said, "Lo Samuel Gamri." We didn't completely blind him; he just diminished him. I would have said that he doesn't go free, even though he can't use the eye. So therefore, we need both cases. Tana Rabbanan. Let's say we have the following Bryce. Rabbo Rofe. Let's say the master is a doctor. And he says to the slave, and so what happened was, the slave says to the doctor, who's his master, he says, "Can you do some surgery on my eye? Basically make my eye look better, plastic surgery, whatever." The Visama, and the master blinds the eye, or Lachtar Loshino, he says, "You're a dentist. Can you work on my tooth?" The Pila, and the dentist knocks out the tooth. The slave can laugh at the doctor and the master and go free, because in the end he did these things, and so he knocked out his tooth, even though it was unintentional. He goes free. Whereas Rashbag Omer v'shichasa, it says in the pasuk, v'shichasa, if he knocks it out basically with harshness, with intent, which means until he intends to hurt the eye, and this wasn't his intent here. So the Rabbanan say that you go free regardless of your intent. What do they do with that verse? So the Gemara says, look at the Tanya, they follow the following price. So let's say he stuck his hand into the womb of the maid, and then he blinded the fetus inside, meaning to say he's trying to help deliver the baby, and he blinds the fetus. So he wasn't intending for anything. He wasn't intending to touch the eye at all. He was just intending to take out the fetus. But there, in the earlier case, in the earlier Brisa, he was intending to touch the eye, just he wasn't intending to blind him. Here, he wasn't even intending to touch the eye. It's a lower level of intent. There, Rebbe Lezer says you're exempt. My time, because the pasuk says you have to intend to do it, which means actually kaven l'shachta. So you intend to damage. The idach, And how do the Rabbanan know this? Mi vishichos, or how does Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel know this? Mi vishichos shichos nafka. You learn out from the fact that it could have said vishichos and says shachasa. Instead, it says shichasa. The idach shichas shichasa lo darish. Whereas the Rabbanan don't make that drasha. So we'll keep going, but let me just stop the recording here.